Hi, Lena. Hi, Joseph. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm thrilled about our show today. We have two wonderful poets, Lena Dunham and Joseph Paulson, with us today. Lena will read first, and then Joseph. Lena Dunham is the ultimate multi-hyphenate, a tremendously skilled and award-winning actor, writer, director, producer, and philanthropist. She was a creator, writer, and star of the hit HBO series Girls, which wrapped after 6 critically acclaimed seasons. She has been nominated for 8 Emmy Awards and has won 2 Golden Globes. Dunham has served as writer, director, and producer on such shows as HBO and BBC's Industry and HBO's Camping. Via her Good Thing Going banner, Dunham has executive produced the HBO Max series Generation and directed the feature-length films Sharp, Stick, and the medieval coming-of-age comedy Catherine Called Bertie. An accomplished author, Lena published a book of personal essays, Not That Kind of Girl, with Random House in September 2014, and was a #1 New York Times bestseller. In 2013, Dunham made history as the first woman to win a DGA award in the Best TV Comedy Director category. In 2010, she won an Independent Spirit Award for Best First Screenplay for her feature Tiny Furniture, which she also starred in and directed. Her poetry is personal, poignant, beautiful, with strength of narrative. Here's a superb poet, Lena Dunham.
Thank you. If you guys saw me, I was just trying to get my dogs out of the room who decided they didn't want to hear my poetry at all. So thank you so much. Everything sounds better being read in your voice. So it makes me feel infinitely more accomplished and grateful. But I'm so honored that you asked me to do this because I love writing poetry and I love the opportunity to share these things, which were what I really focused on while the writer's strike was going on. It was a great time to reconnect to that part of myself and that interest. So here I'm going to share a few. So this is called Knots. I spent 3 hours today untangling a bunch of yarn that I absolutely tangled myself due to lack of experience. Once I gave in to the process, locating the end of the strand and then finding all the places it was double and triple crossed, turning the ball inside out only to form new knots, it turned into a kind of meditation, and time looped in on itself too. It occurred to me that it would be lovely if we could fix any damage we had caused this way as well, diligently retracing our steps, finding the moment one word or phrase hooked over another and caused a clusterfuck. It wouldn't be an easy fix like a time machine or having the power to cause amnesia. After all, you'd be focused on figuring out exactly where it went wrong and then making it go right. You'd have to do the work, but at least there would be a map for how to get there, and with enough discipline, it would happen. I can do almost anything if I know that it's possible. I have a lot of shame, usually in the middle of the night, about the people who don't talk to me anymore, or the people I don't talk to because I let it get too tangled, until there was no fixing it. All you could do was hurl the mess into the crafts drawer and save it for a rainy day. I try and comfort myself by saying I've never done a single thing with ill intentions, only the desire to be heard, and the realization, always too late, that some things are meant to stay with you and just with you, that some things seemed small but were actually rather important, and others seemed negotiable but were really not. I asked my father if everyone has a list of people that they really don't want to run into, and he said, absolutely, kid, it's called growing up. Sometimes my mother will point to an old picture and say, oh, that was my best friend Jean's dog, or wasn't Ellen beautiful? She really had a hard row to hoe. And I'll ask, where is she now? And she'll say, I have no idea. Back then, if someone moved and didn't give you their landline, you might never see them again. Now everyone's baby has a name like an old-timey coal miner's wife, and they're right there on Instagram, just born, their mom's looking blissful without you.
Thank you, Lena. Your poetry is so personal and intricate, and you have such a strong, compelling narrative, and you're so vibrant in your voice. And when did you write your first poem?
Firstly, thank you. Those are beautiful compliments, and from coming from you, especially meaningful. I think I wrote my first poem when I was 6 or 7. I was really lucky. I went to a school that had an amazing poetry program for kids. I went to St. Anne's School in Brooklyn, and we had a teacher named Marty Scoble who we celebrated Allen Ginsberg's birthday every year. And if you wanted to, you could stay for 2 extra hours on a Wednesday. And it was really where I found my community. And again, in college at Oberlin. So throughout, I was lucky enough that throughout my young life and teen years, it was a place that I always had to go. And also that he really instilled in me a love of reading poetry as well.
Well, Allen Ginsberg to me always represented self-liberation, sense of freedom. And obviously there's some words that he used I never had heard in a poem before I read his, Howl. But who are some of the poets that have influenced you?
It's a great question, and I was hoping you would ask. I prepared myself just in case you would ask. I would say the first poet that I really felt influenced by was Nikki Giovanni. Then I fell in love with Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, all of the kind of, women who were writing about mental illness and liberation and sexuality. I love some more kind of intellectual male poets like Philip Larkin and Lawrence Ferlinghetti. When it comes to modern poets, I really love Marie Howe. I love Ariana Reines. And I really love when poetry, am very fond of sort of confessional poetry that makes me feel like I'm just entering a snapshot of the life of the person who's writing. And I also really appreciate, a more complicated sort of, Robert Lowell intellectual wordsmithing, but I really love feeling super connected to the person I'm reading.
You mentioned Nikki Giovanni. Have you seen that new documentary on her going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni project?
No. Is it good?
It was at the Academy a couple of weeks ago, and it's very inspiring. And just the voice, the music of her voice and what she stood for is so important.
I'm so excited to watch. I wrote her a fan note when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade. I remember I wrote it and I used my crayon so that each word was a different color. I don't know if it ever made its way to her, but somewhere in the world is that fan letter.
You also mentioned Anne Sexton and Sylvia Plath. In my time, the late 50s, 60s, early 70s, Sylvia Plath, the most classical, most dramatic, and maybe the most famous. And then Adrienne Rich, who reclaimed poetry for women. And then Anne Sexton, the Anglo-Saxon 1 and 2 syllable confessional, really confessional poet. And she's my favorite of all those women. They're all great, but I'm glad you like those people. You're such a great writer in many forms, novel, your television, your movies, the poetry. How do you determine when you're going to write a poem as opposed to a prose piece?
It's a great question. And I think I hadn't written poetry for a while. And then during the strike, I really wanted to do something that just felt like it wasn't about putting it into the world. It was just finding a way. I think sometimes when writing is your job, something that can be so therapeutic becomes, as much as I still love it, there's all of the pressures of day to day. It's how you make a living. It's how you support your family. And what I love about poetry is that it's just, to me, it's the most direct, intimate relationship with the page. It's never about an audience. It's never about who's reading it. It's about capturing a moment and a feeling and a depth of feeling. And then if I get the opportunity to share it, like with you, that's a beautiful thing. But I love having an avenue for writing. And I feel like when I was sort of in college and thought, oh, I'd like to be a poet when I grow up, that's probably when my poetry was the most self-conscious and when I was trying to imitate people. And now that writing poetry is just something that I do for the love of the game, I find that I don't try to impress anyone, which is a great and very liberating feeling to have.
For me, when I go sit and read poetry or write poetry or work on the poetry show, it's like a place of sanity for me. It's a place where we try to find harmony and we see people have worked out their craft. And in the Bhagavad Gita, in terms of what you just said, the Bhagavad Gita, there are a couple lines that mean a lot to me. And something like, I am not stained by my actions. I do not yearn for their rewards. Just find the goodness in that craft. And we don't know here in America, right? We're always seeking rewards for, doing a good job of poetry. And it should be, I guess, in all of the work we do, just finding goodness and the value in doing the work itself. Obviously, writing television and movies and acting for me and you too, there is a popular art forms. Poetry is not obviously popular. But it's pretty amazing that you have all the ability you do to do all these different forms. What is it within you? Do you think that you just have that reservoir inside of yourself to do whatever it is that you're called upon to do?
Well, first thing I was going to say about you before I answer that lovely question is I think it's amazing that you've been on so many iconic sets. You've worked with so many incredible directors. You've been involved in so many parts of the film business, but that also means that you understand just how kind of, the film business is competitive and it can be, and, Joseph understands this too. It's competitive and we're so lucky to get the opportunities we do. And still there's constant competition for opportunities. And while every creative world has competition, I love that you said poetry is a place of sanity, because I feel like working in the film business, as much as we love it, and there are amazing communities like MPTF, which is a real community to me, there's also the fact that there is so much competition and there is so much intensity, and poetry can be a safe place. And I love that you have that. And I'm very impressed also with your connection to a knowledge of poetry, considering how much else you've achieved in your life. So that's an amazing thing. And in terms of, I think I've always just felt like I had so many feelings. I think a lot of people, creative people, feel this way, like they have so many emotions that they're just spilling out. And so anything that I can find that helps me manage those feelings and manage the intensity of being me and the intensity of my inner life. And so I'm always reaching, whether it's painting or knitting or whatever creative art form is available to me, to be able to manage the challenge of living in the world. And poetry has really been that for me at so many different times.
And when you sit down to write a poem, what is it that kicks off the poem? Is it an idea, a feeling, an image, words coming to you in your mind?
It's interesting because a lot of times when I sit down to write an essay or a screenplay, it's about a story and it's about a plot. And what I love about writing poetry is it can be as simple as, seeing a little girl in the airport and the way that she's looking at her mother. Or, that first poem that I read I was literally on an airplane untangling yarn for hours and hours and hours. And it was about that. Like I love that poetry can just be born of this single image or phrase or sensation, and that you don't have to have the whole story. You don't have to have a whole narrative arc worked out, but then often you'll find just from writing about that feeling that there is a little arc inside of there.
Yeah. Well, I usually don't say this, but just since you have so much knowledge about poetry, that I would just like to tell you and others about some other poets, women poets, Julia Alvarez, Ada Limon, who's the first Latina to be the Poet Laureate of the United States. There's another woman, Natalie Diaz, and obviously the late Louise Glick. And each one of these women just bring the whole ancestry with them. And and they're just incredible poets. And so, you're also an incredible writer. So we're just blessed with so much more than we had when I was growing up. And when I was growing up, there were only, you could probably name about 5 women poets, right? But in our time, since the 60s, at least for me, we just see this burgeoning of so many, such a bounteous or bountiful amount of women, great women poets. So you're certainly one of the great women writers in our time. And what would you like to tell us about, just poetry that maybe that you think is important, subject matters or form that you think poets that maybe we might want, not that we should, but that you think is important for people to focus on in our time?
Well, I think, for example, I love the fact that poetry, there's a book that I wanted to recommend called, I'm actually making sure I get the author's name right. It's called There Are Things More Beautiful Than Beyonce, and it's published by Tin House. And the author's name is, it's Morgan Parker. And what I love about that is, you were talking about the woman who's the first Latina poet laureate of America. Morgan Parker is an amazing poet who's writing about the complexity of being female and Black in America and sort of who we use as our icons, how the icons that come before us. And what I love is when poetry can expand an experience, can make me feel connected even across any form of difference. So whether it's the fact that I can read a man's poetry and feel totally connected to his inner life, or I can read Morgan Parker's poetry and have a deepened understanding of what it is to be Black in America, and that it lives between the personal and the political. And so that's what excites me most. And I love that now you're talking about how there were, 5 women poets you could name when you were young. And now there's a whole new generation of young female poets kind of coming of age in the Instagram age who are able to share really smart political work in a new way. So that's a book I would really recommend to anybody watching. There Are Things More Beautiful Than Beyonce. And also, I just love what it says about what poetry can do for us, which you so beautifully bring to bear with this show.
Well, thank you very much. I feel honored that Jennifer asked me to do it. We have about a minute left. Could you just give us a brief accounting of where you grew up and how you were raised and where do you live these days? What area of America?
Actually, these days, funnily enough, I live in England, which is a place that I had lots of Anglophilia for writing when I was younger. So I came here to make a movie and I ended up meeting my husband and getting married and staying, which I never expected because I was born and raised in New York City. And I always thought, why would you ever leave New York City? It has everything a person could need. It is everything. And then in my, both my parents are artists, and I was raised between New York and Connecticut, where my father's originally from. And then I spent my 20s going back and forth between New York and LA because of the film business. And I think COVID really meant that we could actually make a choice about where we work from. So now I'm here in LA and I go home as often as I can. But this is kind of becoming its own version of home. So that's been thrilling too. But that's why it's 9:30 p.m. here. So if you see darkness all around me, it's not because I'm a vampire. It's just because I'm in.
Well, this has certainly been one of our deepest pleasures to have you on the show. We're so honored and pleased to have you, Lena. You're just you've done such great work and you're such a good person. And so thank you once again for blessing our show.
It's an honor. And I'm so excited to watch you and Joseph. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lena.
Sending all the love. I hope I get to give you a hug soon.
Thank you, Lena, very much. Next poet is Joseph Paulson. Joseph Paulson is poetry editor for the literary journal Months 2 Years. He teaches and writes poetry as a member of the Institute for Arts in Medicine at USC. Paulson was a laureate's choice in the 2022 Maria W. Foss Sonnet Contest, and his work was featured in the most recent volume of Blue Unicorn. Joseph's acting name is Jay Paulson. Jay Paulson started acting professionally at 16. I remember seeing him the first time I saw him as an actor was a recurring role on Sybil. I always remember how excellent and mature he was in terms of being an actor at such a young age. He's a lifetime member of the Actors Studio. Recent credits include Killers of the Flower Moon, Cowboy Bebop, and Rust Creek. He lives by the airport with his wife and 2 sons. I found his poems personal, lyrical, with a focus on the eternal. Here's an excellent poet, Joseph Paulson.
Thank you so much, Harry and Lena. And thanks for having me, Harry. It's a true honor to be here and a true honor to have you in my life. And I'm so grateful for that. And Lena, thanks for sharing your work. It's very open. And I really enjoyed the Midnight Shame, the list of people that maybe we don't talk to or don't talk to us anymore. I think that is fairly universal. So thank you for sharing that. That was something that allowed me to connect with you and your work, through your work. Thank you. Harry, I think I'll start with some recent stuff, and then I brought too much, so I'm just going to go through it. And a lot of my recent stuff is short, so if there's pauses or stuff, I'll just, that may or may not be a part of the poem. Okay. I watched you move from across the room so pleasingly. I watched our entire relationship bloom and rot like some time-lapse movie, so we don't have to. Private joke. 2 toilets left curbside and a handsome man, young for his walking frame, share the same thin smile. Shower water is lucky to slap off your naked body like that. In this part of the city, copper thieves mean cages for ACs. An inquiry concerning truth in poetry. Was that poem true? Asking my ghost. No, it wasn't. And this one? No, none of them are true as I am. This is a sonnet called an Elegy for a County Fair Goldfish. The heat wave brings a change in behavior. Our shining spearhead of a fish begins to stay at the bottom with droopy fins and takes on a grotesque curvature. Though by all accounts, fish have no sense, it seems she knows that something is amiss in the way her gasping makes her list and drift a bit. She never unbends. Have you known a fish to live for years that came home as a prize won at the fair? Whoever thought a fish worth human tears? Golden light of the kitchen, swimming where we lived our daily lives. What appears at first a common thing may become rare. This is an excerpt from a much larger project that I really love. The project is called Alone Among the Stars, being a sort of informal travelogue of the adventures of Captain Jack Peterson, as found in various notebooks at the local swap meet and faithfully set down and typed by Joseph Paulson. And just some background, so you know, this follows this guy Jack Peterson, who's sort of drifting through space, and he eats these things called sustenance cubes to keep him going. They're kind of these bland cubes, and his ship is called the Athena. He named his ship the Athena So if you hear a reference to Athena, that's his ship. And if he's talking about eating cubes, you now know that's how he stays alive for years in space. This chapter of Alone Among the Stars is called Time Moves Slowly and Then Fruitful Canyons. Once I watched a mockingbird sing out from dawn till dusk and every tick between. His tunes impressed with their variety, there seemed no end to what that bird could do with such a voice. He'd mix a godly hymn with seaman's shanty, now reptilian croaks, and then a run of notes like Chopin might have played, waving through the morning light. And next, a different rhythm, like the one that humans first did coo at newborn young. I tried to count the modes and styles the bird placed in the air, lost cause, and my small mind began to unfold else. Would science say it's only for a mate? Would poets say it's only out of joy? Did it sing with any feeling I would recognize? It certainly was simple to imply. Was it something more than art or labor? No answer put my mind at peace, and so I stayed as long as he did sing up there and passed the day in violent contemplation. Between the maker and the made, there is the making, and the making may not stand for explanation in the terms we've used till now. No answer why he sang all day sufficed. The sound was him and me and every value ever known, or else a dream. I grew a decent beard. It wasn't me. But little things like clipping nails remind one that this body needs good care and oft. When I wash up, I thank my different parts for working well and getting their jobs done. All these years and not a cavity. Of course, sustenance cubes aren't likely to rot teeth, and I won't catch a common cold out here. I often wonder what it will be like when I get to the end. It humors me. The question stays the same for all who know that time is running down the day we're born, and no one knows their closings when or how. In this, I'm joined by all my human kin. Alarm! At long last, something new appears on Athene's screens. A planet, red and green, and scored with canyons. Some old apple there Cézanne forgot to paint, wrinkled as if cellared long past winter. Banking down to see what we might find, how rare it is to meet an atmosphere that's fit for me. While thin, this planet had enough O2 that I could walk around as on a stroll. Athena tested for bacteria and microbes that would harm a visitor, and finding none did flash a green light on. And I was safe to step onto this place. I hadn't been on land without a helmet since leaving Earth, and though a little short of breath, the feeling was unmatched for joy I've known in all my life. Something about taking nature's air into my lungs filled me with sensations long forgot. It is a special thing to take in air. I'd sipped it through my nostrils with great sniffs and gulped at it like fish will gulp at water. I was delirious with pleasure then, more than a little dizzy as I roamed, but brought up stone cold sober as I neared the edge of some ravine and did recall those creases I had seen from space. In fact, represented networks of steep canyons. At bottom ran a bright green rivulet, and all around it claret-colored moss. The two did seem in perfect harmony and gave off waves of such enchanting glow that I was drawn into the canyon then and slid right down the slope in rills of scree. Once stopped, the rufous slime began to creep at me. I turned to leave. The rise was far too steep. I'd get about 5 feet and slide back down as on some pebbly escalator. And though the ruby growth was slow, it seemed intent on apprehending me. I was concerned. And so I punched coordinates into my arm and called that the Athena meet me here and aid me in my plight. In moments, there she was above. Her hull shined with the reddish-greenish glow, and I let out a grateful sigh as she did lower a cable to me there and pulled me out, right as the scarlet carpet neared my boots. Then these are, I'll just do a few of old faves, I guess. The Lot. Behind the tennis court, there's a forgotten patch where lost balls slowly fade green to gray. And pumpkin grows wild to the size of grapefruit, rots, then seeds itself anew. Am I one or two? One stem of stargazers, a flower not yet open, a flower about to open, a flower already open. You are haunting me well. Construction site. At dawn, a tiny man climbs hand over hand the mast of his tower crane. Installing himself in its cabin, the world can spin from a hook again. Change of plans. When Lena brought her chicken pot pie, I said, let's have that tonight instead. But you, looking forward to takeout all week, began to cry. I got angry, though who knows what's worth crying about? You just want to save money. And me, what's wrong with wanting to save money? I'm unemployed. See the trustee carry out the sentence that was also his inheritance? Men must be debuoyed. The furrier's son. Father, why are your arms covered in bloody scratches? I receive them when I skin the catses. Is there not another way to gain the silky furses? You think by asking nice enough, she'll happily hand me herses? I will rip the drippy skinsies from the kitties. Not a boy. It's not our business to manufacture pities. Or maybe one or two last to see. Lesson. I bid my anus watch the fire, and thinking it was safe, let myself leave me. Sleep is what dreams require. I saw an old friend, long deceased, so death is not the end. I awoke in chill of dark, and the fire had all but died. And angry with my anus, grabbed a smoldering brand, jammed it hard inside. Both of my mouths made a hissing sound. All my eyes cried. For weeks, I was made, sometimes twice in one day, to recall this body can't be trusted. This body in which I'm strangely laid. I think that's enough for today. I have a few more, but I feel like I brought too much. So should we discuss or some more poetry? What do you think, Harry?
Well, thank you very much for your wonderful, imaginative, concise, and clear poetry. Joseph, I'm always tempted to call you Jay. That's the way I knew you growing up. And so when did you write your first poem?
I wrote my first poem when I was 2. I spoke it out loud. I didn't know how to write. I said, moon like half a ball. And I think everyone writes poetry from before they can even talk. So, but that would be my first official poem that's been recounted to me. I don't even remember saying it, but they said I looked up and said moon like half a ball. So that was my first poem.
I like that. When did you? Once you started writing poetry in a more regular, serious way than when you were that age, who were some of the poets before that influenced you?
I love that question. And also, Harry, I have to flip it around really quickly because we were talking about being hyphenates. And you said you know me as Jay, and my screen name or stage name, everyone calls me Jay. That's what my parents called me from the day I was born. Why did they even put Joseph on the birth certificate? But they did. And some of my credit cards still say it, and my taxes say it, and all this. When I check into a hotel, the guy says, okay, you're all set, Joe. And I'm sort of shocked. Even I'm shocked to hear it. And I write as Joseph, Harry, but you're right. I act as Jay. My friends call me Jay. And it's like I tried to keep the two separate for so long, even though they inform one another ridiculously, as you know. But I was very curious to hear from you in this day of hyphenates and everything. Did you prefer actor, poet, poet, actor, or any form or version, or did it matter on who you were talking with? Or
Well, to me, I made a living as an actor, and poetry is a non-commercial art form, but it doesn't matter to me. Either one. I mean, I started, loving movies when I was real young. So movies go back real deep in me. I didn't start writing poetry until I was 26. But the show's really not about me so much, but let's stick with you.
Okay, sure.
You went to, as I remember, didn't you go to UCLA and did you get a BA in English?
Yeah, I ended up at UCLA getting a BA in history, actually, because I was overwhelmed and frightened by the English program. You had to read all these old books, all these old dusty books in Middle English and stuff. Now, of course, I've gone back and read a lot of them, and they're really good. But at the time, I wasn't ready for them, so I got my degree in history.
And then the question that I asked you earlier was what poets influenced you before you started writing poetry in a serious, regular way?
Sure. I remember early on as a kid, my mom got me a copy of Ogden Nash, and that was really neat because I saw the humor and the wit and the rhymes, the fun to rhyme, and also Shel Silverstein. We would check him out from the library, and it'd be due, and I would just check him out again and again and again. Every time it was due, I would ask for it back. Unless someone had a hold on it, I could get it. Shel Silverstein was, and then when I was in high school and got really serious about poetry, of course, the beats. I really liked the beats, and I thought they were so cool. And I would, hang out with strange people and smoke cigarettes and talk about beat poetry and go to coffee houses. And I thought that was so neat. Then I kind of outgrew that phase too. I returned to poetry and gave it what it deserved later. Say maybe around 40, even though I've been writing my whole life. At 40, I decided I have to officially, this demands me now, and I need to listen to that and do this. And at that point, I really sort of tried to give myself a foundation. And I suggest everyone read an anthology, a well-respected anthology, just to give yourself a foundation of our lovely history of English verse and the way that our language has been used, the English language has been used to make art since Chaucer or even before. As far as one of my favorite poets is Louise Bogan. I think she's phenomenal, and I love that her Blue Estuaries, her sort of greatest hits, is nice and thin. You see all these guys who do their complete works about this big, 500 pages. She really did pick out her best of her best, and so it's such a joy to read. There's almost not a stinker in there. And I love Helen Hoyt. She was a really early modernist. Talk about an early female poet when there weren't many. She really writes beautiful stuff. Helen Hoyt. I love Timothy Steele, Snodgrass, Naomi Raplansky. Harry, anyone ever ask you, do you like jazz? And you feel embarrassed to say Miles Davis and John Coltrane because everyone says that?
I love jazz. I just love to listen to instrumental jazz, growing up rock and roll. But when you sit down to write a poem, what do you begin with? Do you have an image? Do you have an idea? Do you have an emotion? Is there a phrase or something visual that kicks off the poem?
Most of my straight poetry is what you might call occasional poetry. So the occasion occurs, something strikes, the afflatus or whatever you want to call it, something hits me. It does feel like it comes to me. I'm not going out to seek it, but if something hits me, and that's the call that I then answer, usually later in the evening. I'll jot something down quickly, like the thing that occurred, the moment, the occasion, and then later in the evening, revisit it when I've got some quiet time to myself to write. So I think most of my poetry is of that matter. But what's nice about having a project like the one I read from is that that gives me something to sit down to at night and work on, whether I have had an extraordinarily poetic day or not. I can come back to that and work on it. So I've really enjoyed finding those sort of projects as I've been writing poetry, something that can be a little more work a day, and then the other stuff that's more sort of ephemeral and heavenly and, sacred.
Since this is MPTF, a movie place and TV place, what was it like working with you when you did Killers of the Flower Moon? How did you enjoy that?
Enjoyed it quite a bit, Harry. And I thought of you a lot because I know you've worked with Marty numerous times. And so I was really thinking this is so neat that our paths can cross in this regard as well. And it was lovely. The entire thing was incredible. He turned 5 blocks of Bartlesville, Oklahoma into a 200-year-old or 100-year-old Western scene. And it was absolutely brought to life in a way that I could never have imagined. And I felt so lucky to be a part of it, even a small part of it. I was very grateful for it. And he was very lovely and very, yeah.
Where did you shoot it? Oklahoma?
Yeah, they did. They shot it in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And then Pawhuska was the town that they transformed back into the old Osage country. And it was really spectacular just to see the scale of it, and to see horses in the street, and that they put dirt on all the roads and really turned all the storefronts were like an old West town, and I couldn't believe it. It's just, and then you're dressed up in the old clothes and you just sort of, it's kind of one of the reasons we all got into this in the first place. I think really playing make-believe, you look around yourself and say, this is unbelievable. Where am I? What am I doing here? So, and I had to play a car salesman. And at one point, I'm so excited I made the sale. I hit the car with my hat, and they said to me, "Oh, Jay, you can't hit the car. These are real cars. Okay, these are really 100-year-old cars. You can't hit them." I said, "Fine, no, sorry." So after that, I mimed hitting the car.
Yeah, he's a great director, huh?
Yeah, he is. I really.
He really sets up the stage for the quietness and everything. Perfect setting for an actor, don't you think?
I do, and I loved too. I don't know whether when I went back, he was watching on the monitors behind the set and in the darkened room, so he could see the screen clearly. And I walked back there. He asked me to come back for some notes. As I walked back, and I swear he had that famous blue New York coffee cup. Do you know that famous blue one with the Greek lettering that everyone in New York drinks these? And I just couldn't believe it, what is it doing here, or whether he brought it all the way or something. But I'll never forget that. I see, looking at this coffee cup there.
Well, it's such a great film too. It's really an important subject matter, and I'm glad you worked on it. He's really, when Clint Eastwood made some of those films of his, Mystic River, among others, I always said that Clint Eastwood was the American tragedian in film. And I think Scorsese, in particular this film, but many others too, he's the American tragedian too, because you leave the movie after watching it, and just the effect of what you've seen is somewhat pastoral in terms of its movement, even though there's a lot of killing in the picture, and it just really sticks with you. The residue just stays with you. And so I'm glad you worked with him. It's certainly an honor. You're also, I remember when you were younger, one time I read a personal essay that you wrote. You're always such a splendid prose writer. How do you still write prose, or you're just sticking with poetry? And if you do, you just stick with poetry these days, or what?
Yeah, these days I've tried a lot of different kind of writing and screenwriting and prose, short story, and I've never tackled a novel, but I like them all, but I do think poetry, Lena really covered my bases with that one when she said that poetry becomes this space that can really be mine, that I won't allow anyone to ask anything of me except me. And that is so sacred. And of course, I do want to share it with people. And of course, I hope it brings delight to people. But when I'm actually there, living poetically, allowing the poem in, and then taking the poem to the language and trying to get it right is so special and sacred that that's where I want to be and what I want to be doing. And I haven't had that sort of prose instinct. That being said, the project I read from is a little prosy. You know, it's a 1,100 lines of blank verse, so it's definitely verse, but it's about a space guy exploring planets. You know, so that's it kind of scratches a little bit of a narrative itch there. I get to explore the universe through his eyes, or you know.
What is it about the poetry form that attracts you to it?
Oh, the art of language, using words, because I love words. I think words are the worst and the best thing we have. You know, they're a terrible way to communicate, and they're all we got. And not all we got, but you know, we use them a lot. And I love words. I love the way they sound, and I love to use them as music and art.
Well, here's Jennifer Clymer, our wonderful director. Jennifer, what would you like to say?
I want to say thank you all. This has been yet another amazing hour. Jay, I wanted to let you know that your movie is going to be here playing on the campus this coming weekend. It's a matinee on Sunday because, you know, with a more senior crowd, starting a 4-hour movie at 7 is probably not the best idea. So it's going to start earlier in the day. And I'm super excited for everyone to have the opportunity to see it here. It's amazing. And what you just said about words being wonderful and terrible so resonates with me. I think poetry as a written language, in a way, is, as I was about to say, texting has, in a way, damaged our art form that is language, in my humble opinion. Or maybe it's taken it in a different direction that I don't have a full understanding or appreciation of what the new evolution of language is through texting. But I feel what you mean when you say words are beautiful and terrible, because certainly with the way people fire off words, sometimes without thinking, it can be one of the most dangerous weapons. Yeah.
Well, may I just interject one last thing, Jennifer? Since this is a motion picture country home, could you tell us, I know you've done a lot of television, as I mentioned, you did Sybil, and that was a great show. What are 2 or 3 of your favorite movies, of your top movies of all time, Jay?
Oh boy, top movies of all time. Is the documentary okay?
Anything that's...
Videograms from a Revolution is an incredibly powerful documentary about a revolution in Romania, and some others. I mean, I love. Oh God, there's so many. But then when I'm put on the spot, I'm like, oh gosh, I hesitate to. What are some of the other ones?
No pressure.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny because I do think it's so subjective, and I don't. It's in a weird way. It's almost so intimate a question, Harry.
Well, you know, you mentioned the documentary. Let me just say one recommendation: The Battles of Algiers is
incredible.
Talk about fiction close to documentary. It's 2:00, and I want to just thank you, Jay Paulson, and thank you, Lena Dunham. It's been a wonderful sacred hour, and I just want to take 1 second to tell you about next Tuesday's show. We have 2 superb poets with us, Alicia Partnoy and Adele Slaughter, and so I hope people will turn in for that. So thank you once again, Joseph Paulson and Lena Dunham, and here's Jennifer Clymer to take us home.
Thank you, Harry. Thanks so much for the honor.